Well, the idea of this production is we're launching the Lost Whiskey brand, and we're trying to promote the value of conversation with some interesting folks. So this is the first bottle out of bottle number one. So we're going to open this thing. We're going to save the leather tab. Dad, that's yours.
Oh boy, that'll be good on a key fob. Oh my gosh, barrel number one. Number one. I like the leather.
So the idea behind Lost Whiskey, and hopefully the bigger stories, we want to interview interesting people. There's nobody more interesting in my life than my old man. He's got a good story to tell. And so the value of bourbon or good food to us is always about the conversation of people and where you were at when you shared that with somebody. So this is a real treat for me and the Lost Whiskey Group to have my dad up here on the mountain in front of a fire in Lost Whiskey Cabin here in Virginia, overlooking Delaplane, Virginia. This is horse and wine country, hunt country. My dad flew in from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where he was born and raised. So the format of this will be pretty simple. We're going to enjoy some bourbon here and some conversation and talk about more about the legacy. I'm sure he'll get embarrassed about this, but the legacy of the old man, his Western roots, how that translates to his work and his inflection points. And so I hope it's an interesting tale, and thanks for joining me, Dad.
Mark, this is nice. Smooth, oh my gosh.
So one of the reasons why I chose you, Dad, was obviously I'm biased, unfiltered bias, but to give you the cliff notes, and I'll probably not do justice to it, but I think that one could argue that my father and his career in conservation, there's not too many living Americans maybe in the world that have conserved as much land. It's pushing 30 million acres currently living today. He's devoted his entire life to this, and the curious part that I've wrestled with in my head and I've talked to my kids about is, how and why it happened. I have my own theory, and I'm sure you do too, that it all starts from your upbringing. So Dad, if you could, I want you to talk about, you grew up out west in God's country. You guys were never uncomfortable, but life was tough back then. So talk to me about your young upbringing up through, how did it all start?
Well, it's great to join you up here at Lost Whiskey. This is probably a pretty good place to try to recollect. Grew up on a ranch in Jackson Hole, born in 1942, and as I think about it, I had the opportunity to live a lifestyle early on that was probably similar to what folks here in the Blue Hill Appalachian country were living in the 1890s, 1880s. No electricity, very little use of the internal combustion engine, very isolated. Everything had to be done by hand or with teams. So it was a good way to start out. There were no grocery stores. As I said, no electricity. Everything had to be heat by wood that had to be cut by hand, chopped by hand. Of course, we didn't have the hardwoods that you have here. We had soft conifers, so it just took mountains of firewood. You only got 30 days a year in Jackson Hole country, 35 that are frost-free. So just staying warm was a battle for everybody. So I spent a lot of time chopping, stacking wood. There were no stores, so, and even if there were, you couldn't get anywhere because you had 4 or 5 feet of snow, you were isolated. So I think we went to town twice a winter. That was a 3-day trip with a horse and sleigh. It was hard on women. I mean, to keep the place warm, cooking, you had to fire up the stove for everything, you had to separate the milk, you had to do the laundry. Cook for your entire family and whatever workers you had. So growing up was, I remember in the summer, since you didn't have electricity, refrigerating food was hard. So in the winter, I remember going with my dad down with a team of horses and big saws, and you cut big blocks of ice out of a beaver dam, lifted them up on the sleigh, hauled them back to the ranch, and there was a shed there full of sawdust. And so you buried all this ice in the sawdust. Then when summer came, well, you had to keep your milk and vegetables cool. So you'd go out, get a block out of the ice house, put it in the old ice boxes. Might work for a few hours, and you had to go get another block of ice. You had to raise all your own vegetables. You had a big garden. I remember my mom weeks over a wood stove in the fall canning peas and peaches and beans. Everything had to be canned. All your vegetables. I remember asking Mom, I said, what was the hardest thing you had to do? She said, cleaning the milk separator. The Turner's milk cows, they put cans of milk on the male sleigh and send it to their neighbors, but Dad would come in with several big buckets of, I remember milking with him, and leave him in the main house. He'd go out and have to feed livestock. And Mom would have to take that milk down into the basement with an old hand separator, separate the cream and whatever she's gonna make butter with. And she said, cleaning that damn separator. She had to take all those screens out, all those plates, wash them by hand, put them back together before she'd go the rest of her days.
Wasn't there a story, the ranch was founded or bought from a homestead, an original, was it the Jump Homestead or wasn't there a milk cow and an old lady story there?
Oh, you might be referring to the famous pitchfork murder. The Hedricks were homesteads, part of the ranch. Mrs. Hedrick had 2 daughters. Charlie Hedrick, her husband, was gone a lot, and she had a milk cow. I don't know how she got the milk cow. And a cranky old single neighbor came from up the valley and said, demanded that he get the milk cow back. She just pleaded with him. He says, you can't take the milk cow. I needed to take care of my 2 young daughters. Please don't take the milk cow. He said, you either pay me for it, because I'm taking the milk cow. She said, she was just frantic. Don't take the milk cow. So he stomps out of the house to go get the milk cow. Damn, she didn't follow him out of the house quietly. And she walked by the hay wagon, removed a pitchfork, dispatched the guy that owned the milk cow, murdered him right there in the front yard. Went and got the girls. They drug him into the corral, dug a hole, buried him. She brought in all the livestock, ran him around the corral to hide where the grave was. And she kept the milk cow. Girls had milk. In those days, there wasn't much law and order. I guess after a while, maybe neighbors noticed that the old bachelor had disappeared.
Well, we're getting a little off subject, but I think it's an interesting tale because the women of the West are their own breed, and you got to be tough out there. So I think that the pivot point of sharing the Jackson Hole country with people that have never been there, one of the questions my daughter, Sarah, your granddaughter, had last night when I was talking to her that we were going to have this conversation today is, ask Papa how to explain the magic of the Tetons or Triangle X to someone who's never been there. How would you describe that magic?
Well, we're blessed to be located in one of the most gorgeous landscapes that the good Lord ever created. We're right in the middle of a large open mountain valley. Right out of the front porch, we have one of the most magnificent mountain ranges anywhere in the world. It goes from 0 to 7,000 vertical feet, just straight up, without any foothills. We have the Snake River, which is the headwaters of the Columbia, going right through our front yard. Wonderful fishery. Because where the Triangle X is located in an old glacial bowl, it's got wonderful habitat, willows and wetlands and aspen trees and deep woods and open meadows. We just got an abundance of wildlife. I mean, any day our guests, or we can get up and see a herd of elk, you can see moose down in the willow bottoms, you can see bison out in the meadow, you can see mule deer up on the hill. We've got grizzlies wandering through the property, wolves scampering along the hills, nest of bald eagles, sandhill cranes, trumpeter swans. It's just a place where you can still see wildness and experience quiet and incredible beauty. And we get to experience the seasons. Dramatic falls, heavy winters. Springs are sometimes a little elusive. We go from mud and snow to greenery, and of course the summers are wonderful. So to be able to share that with other people,
Should we keep going?
people from around the country, around the world.
So, I always loved the way that Marty Murray, I knew, is a mentor of yours. She described the valley as the perfect valley. If God were to make the perfect valley, you'd have tall mountains that came up to Stark, and you'd have emerald lakes at the base of the mountains, and you'd have a winding river through it, and you'd have fields of hay, and this perfect valley. That's I've always enjoyed how she described that. But more, so you're living in Jackson, growing up on the ranch, sharing it with people. And maybe the Marys would answer this question, but when did your love of that place turn into potentially something that may be worthy of a career?
Well, it was intended to be. Early on, I really developed a personal passion and addiction to wildlife. I just love wildlife. I've not only hunted and fished, but I photographed wildlife. And for some reason, I brought a lot of them home. We always had pet magpies, or I had hawks and owls and ravens, pet ravens. Eventually that got me into doing the first field research on bald eagles, ospreys, golden eagles in the Yellowstone region, Jacksonville. And then I expanded that to 5 other states. So I just love fiddling with wildlife. I used to trap squirrels for Walt Disney. They were filming their true life adventures. I always had plaster powder in my saddlebag, so if I found a really nice coyote track or something, I could get my plaster out and mix it up and make a cast of the wildlife. So, but I grew up, when I went to school, I was in pre-med. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, a surgeon.
So, I'm trying to bridge the gap between a hard life rancher and celebrating the West to going off into school at Notre Dame. You're working with the Bald Eagle, and then you went on to Michigan, right, for a zoology degree?
Yeah, I got an opportunity to go there for a graduate degree and a master's in zoology and natural resources, and then I was working on a PhD in wildlife ecology. But as I said, I thought I wanted to, at the University of Notre Dame, I studied pre-med. And I got accepted to medical school. And I thought, whoa, maybe I better think about this. We had an old family doctor that brought me into the world, your two uncles, Uncle Harold and Uncle Donald. He said, Johnny, I'm proud of you wanting to be a doctor, but you know, if you want to be a specialist, you'll have to live in a big city. There'll never be room for a specialist in Jackson Hole. Of course, now we've got 40 or 50 of them. So I thought, well, I don't want to live in a big city. I better think about this. So I went to Europe, spent a year in Austria running a foreign studies program, which involved more skiing and drinking beer than doing any real work. So I thought, God, I don't want to be, it's wildlife I want to do. So then I went to University of Michigan, and something unique happened there. The University of Michigan was on fire. It was anti-Vietnam and civil rights. You couldn't walk across campus without being barraged or setting cars on fire. Black Panthers, SDS, White Panthers, I mean, the place was just on fire. Well, 3 or 4 of us in graduate school sitting around coffee one morning and said, you know, Americans need to care about the environment. Our water, our air, our wildlife, our public lands, toxic chemicals. They said, we need to do something to a wake-up call for America. They need to pay attention to
What year was this?
Environment. So this would have been in the mid 60s, later 60s. So I said, aha, we'll do a teach-in on the environment. Teach-in on the environment, University of Michigan. Well, little did I know that I was going to screw up a year in graduate school, but we ended up involving 30, 40,000 people. Got national press.
It was a sit-in, right?
Well, it was a teach-in. It was 3 or 4 days of conferences and activities. And I had the cast of Hair there from Chicago, and Gordon Lightfoot. We got people involved all over Michigan. I mean, they started to do cleanups and tree planting and all kinds of things.
So we left off and you were talking about your teach-in at Michigan.
Yeah, that was probably an interesting turning point. Putting this teaching on the environment together, I was one of the leaders and had 400 or 500 students working for me to put this thing on. And every day I had a meeting or tried to do something, I'd get confronted by people on campus, and sometimes 15, 20 minutes they demonstrate against Turner. And the reason was, as I mentioned, the Vietnam War was going on, and I pretty much felt we ought to support our troops. The men and women over there, we'd sent over there to fight. And second, President Nixon had just put me on a student council on pollution and environment called SCOPE at the Department of Interior. And I was pretty conservative, so I got attacked every time, and it was a good experience. I mean, I knew all these guys, these radicals and liberals. So it was very successful, and it really was the groundwork sparked the idea of Earth Day, National Earth Day. Senator Gaylord Nelson and others were thinking of this idea, Earth Day. So they came over and we showed them how to do it, how to get started. I gave them all our t-shirts and buttons. And
Because he gets credit for the first Earth Day, Gaylord does, correct?
yeah, and he was the one that shepherded that, but we're the one, he came over and we showed him how to organize, and they had no money. I gave them all our pins and t-shirts and bumper stickers, and they sold those. They all had Give Earth a Chance, because the big thing then was Give Peace a Chance, the anti-Vietnam protesters. So it was really the start of, it was the launch of Earth Day, and there's a new book out about Earth Day that gives the rascals at the University of Michigan that teach it is one that really gave me the ideas and the funding to get it going.
So it saw that you had a fervor there nationally for the first time. You saw people really wearing their hearts on their sleeve for the environment in a public setting, a real turning point. Well, one of my favorite stories was when you were in college, it may have been at Notre Dame, and since it's about Christmas time, it's a great time, and you came home from studying out east or Midwest, and Harold had a problem, your older brother, with some horses.
Well, you're right. I came home from Notre Dame, a soft, pampered college student. And as you know, we're in the big game hunting business. You go to the wilderness, take 100 head of stock with you, and you're up there for 2.5 months. The horses have to be turned loose every night to feed. They've got to eat. There are no fences, no corrals. So you turn them loose every night and then go try to find them the next morning. Well, at the end of the season, you got 2 or 3 feet of snow, and your elk hunters are ready to go home. You got to get out of the mountains. You got to get out, or you're not going to get out. So you start tearing down your camps, and you got to go find all these horses. Well, luck would have it that after several days of searching, we couldn't find 4 of the horses. And we said, we got to get out of these mountains, head back to the low country. And tragically, sadly, we can't find these horses. So obviously, they were going to winter kill up in the mountains. So they pulled the cans. Well, so we come home for Christmas a month and a half later, and danged of a Wyoming Game and Fish plane running track counts and stuff in the backcountry spotted these horses. They'd worked up on a ridge where there was a little bit of wind-blown grass and so forth, but obviously they weren't in very good shape. They were half starved. They were eating each other's tails. They were eating wood. So my mom, she was pretty wise. There were some trappers in that end of the valley, and she said, look, I'll pay you. You guys, when you're in there snowshoeing, would you please shoot these horses? Put them out of their misery. It's a good thing to do. So I got home for Christmas. Harold came home he was in the Army. And we got to thinking, I says, we'll go get those horses. We'll go get them. So it's about a few days before Christmas, we get 7 or 8 of the biggest, strongest horses we have down in the valley. We load them up. All we took were our saddles, sleeping bag, probably a little bit of food, and bales of hay. And we headed out 2 days before Christmas to go get those horses. And I remember it went pretty well at first. We made pretty good time, 2.5 feet of snow, and still we started to get up in the mountains. The snow really got deep. And it's the worst I've ever pushed horses through. You'd bring a horse around front and he would lunge 50, 100 yards and then just fall over in exhaustion. And you'd bring another horse around and lunge some more. It was getting dark, and I thought, we're not going to make it into where our camp was. A little gray horse named Steele, and danged if I didn't put him out front. And he took us that last half mile into camp. So now we're into our old hunting camp. There's a trapper's cabin we spent the night in. The next day we try to get these horses, which were about 6 miles above us. And we got up in the morning, incidentally, it was 62 below zero.
62.
That's what was recorded in the valley. 62 below that morning. We woke up. And we looked out like dumb young kids. The horses were all gone. Our horses had left us. We put them in a corral, fed them the hay, crawled in that cabin, went to sleep. Well, they knocked the corral down during the night, and away they went. They said, we're out of here. To hell with this.
Can't blame them.
We're going back to Jackson Hole. So I wrote in the snow, horses with a big arrow, because the little game and fish super cub was coming by that morning to tell him we'd lost our horses. Well, Harold tried to catch him. He had longer legs. And horses don't build a trail, they post hole, as you know. And he had longer legs. And he went after him for 3 or 4 miles and couldn't catch him. They'd already got him down the trail. Well, that night, our old wonderful foreman, Ike Breen, brings our horses back to us. And it is cold. I mean, I remember chopping a hole in the ice with an axe to get a little bit of water in a big can. And you dip down to get some water and pour it in a bucket, and before you could dip again, the ice had already formed back over the creek. So it was cold. So they brought our horses in. 3rd day, Christmas morning, we went after these horses. Went 3 or 4 miles, and it was really hard on horses. It was through an old burn with a lot of buried logs, and these horses fall over and couldn't see where to step. And finally got about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're in a canyon. These horses are still above us, and I said, Harold, we haven't gone 100 yards in over an hour trying to break trail. We're not going to make it. Boy, to come that far, to go through that much, get that close to those horses, but we weren't going to make it. So turned around, came out, missed Christmas. Luckily to get out ourselves. Make a long story short, those trappers went in 10 days later to shoot those horses. And they snowshoed up on them, and they had to shoot 2 of them. But 2 others, they just pushed over in the snow, slid them down off the mountain, and fortunately the trail that we had put in there at the bottom of this slope was still there. It hadn't snowed. And they slowly led those 2 horses out. The game and fish plane dropped them hay every day. 2 of those horses came out. I don't know if you remember old Clay, but tough old horse. So 2 of the horses we saved. We were lucky to get out alive, but probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. But
Well, that's a great story. One of my favorite. So you got into politics young. I think you were 28 when you were elected. A lot of that had to do with your bald eagle work. I think Tom Brokaw came out and did a piece on the bald eagles and interviewed you, correct? So you're into the state legislature in Wyoming. Young buck. Talk to me a little bit about your time in the legislature and some of the characters, because I've always been interested in the fact that in Wyoming, you included, have had remarkably success at the national level, and a lot of the people you served with, they seem to have made this similar grit. So talk to us about the state legislator time.
well, I had no intention of being a politician till a neighbor stopped by and said, one of you Turner boys are going to run for the legislature. The old guard run the Republican Party long enough, and Harold said, I'm not going to do it. And I said, well, I'm damn sure not. I'm working on a PhD in wildlife. Long story short, I ran on an ecological platform in 1969. Fortunately, nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. But I was, the teacher in the University of Michigan had instilled me an interest in public policy programs, laws, what we were doing to protect our outdoors and our air, land, and water, and how could we do better. And at the time, Wyoming was looking at being right on the cusp of an energy boom. Coal and Powder River Basin, oil and gas development. So Wyoming was coming onto the world stage of major development. And we didn't have any environmental programs for open cut mining. Our air quality laws were weak. Water quality, there was no way to prepare communities for boom and bust crime and economy. So that did motivate me to really get involved. Old timer said, now John, when you go down there, behave yourself. Just be quiet and get levels of trust and just watch what goes on. and build levels of respect. Well, I didn't adhere to that, unfortunately, because major dams were being proposed on the upper Green River Basin. And I said, no, we're not going to allow that. That was a priority for Republican Governor Stan Hathaway. So I took that on and defeated it. About the same time, Wyoming became unfortunately known for killing eagles. Wool growers were poisoning bald golden eagles, shooting them out of helicopters. And I was the only one in the state who stood up for the eagles against some of the more powerful political forces in Wyoming, the stock growers, wool growers, Republicans. So I ended up right in the middle of that thing on national. I started rehabilitating eagles, but more important, started to look at Wyoming's laws. I helped draft what's been one of the most comprehensive, successful mine reclamation program anywhere in the country. We worked on industrial siting, we worked on clean water laws. But one of the things I did that I'm really pleased with, I thought Wyoming is going to have a lot of revenues from the mineral development. We shouldn't just spend all that money today. We're harvesting a resource that belongs to generations of Wyoming citizens. So I propose we put a lot away for the future in a mineral trust fund. And I think it took a constitutional amendment, but I think Wyoming now has $7 to $9 billion in the bank to help our schools and mental health. Another thing I did was sponsor local excise tax that people could vote on. And the governor's John legislature will never let communities vote on raising taxes locally. Well, I got it through, and it just saved Wyoming towns and counties. Rock Springs, Gillette, Casper. Worked on a wildlife trust fund that put money into protecting habitat, reimbursing ranchers for conservation easement, minimum stream flows. We redid all the game and fish laws to bring them up to speed, so we had the tools to manage what are some of the finest wildlife complexes left anywhere. So the Wyoming legislature was very conservative, very Republican, and yet I think we passed some of the most, we were one of the most forward-looking states of any in the country.
Name some of the characters you served with, the Simpsons, and Genies, Wallops. God, the list goes on, but...
We had some real giants. Al Simpson would be one of them. And it was the citizen legislature. We didn't get any salary. We didn't have staff. I mean, you had realtors and teachers and railroad workers and ranchers, and just common people from our Wyoming wanting to do the right thing. And everybody knew everybody. You had to deal with people straightforward, honestly. But this was a conservative body, and working together with the people of Wyoming, best interests of mind. We did a good program, paving, good laws, good programs, which Wyoming has benefited greatly from. Conserve our natural resources, conserve our fiscal resources long-term, look out for our communities, look out for our citizens that were less fortunate than others. Those programs were all put in back in the 70s and 80s.
So you built a record and some good friends in Wyoming, and then George H. Bush knocked on your door and asked you to be director of Fish and Wildlife. You've always said to me that being director of Fish and Wildlife is one of your favorite jobs, but it wasn't without controversy. You had maybe some of the two most contentious issues in modern times with the Fish and Wildlife, and that's the spotted owl and the Yellowstone wolf interaction on your plate. So I know there's a lot of ranchers even today that are pissed at you for making that decision. Walk me through your time with the Fish and Wildlife sites and why it meant so much to you, but maybe explain or defend your decision to reintroduce wolves.
Well, President George H.W. Bush certainly paid me a great tribute by giving me the honor to be director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. I came in at a time when morale was pretty bad in the service. Backlog of endangered species. We're facing the spotted owl. The country was losing 500,000 acres a year of wetlands, coastal areas, and so it was a good time to come into the agency, try to rebuild it. Certainly the spotted owl decision, some would say, is still the biggest decision, the most impactful decision ever been made under the Endangered Species Act.
We sure saw it this year with the fires, right? People blame that.
Pardon me?
Didn't the fires this year in California, people blame that, the spotted owl decision?
No, they can't really, because the spotted owl was Northern California, Washington, Oregon. Certainly we felt that you had to protect old growth forests, and because the spotted owl didn't do. But I just said we got to follow the science, we got to follow the law. It impacted probably 9 million acres. Scared the hell out of the Northwest. People just wanted to work in the woods and make a living at a timber mill. But the Northwest had overcut their forests, the old growth. Their mills weren't very efficient. But it was a big decision. I couldn't go to the Northwest without security. Couldn't sleep in a motel room without a guard outside my room. It was a big decision. Got a lot of national press. Maybe I was naive or arrogant enough to think after 30, 40 years of impasse over returning wolves to Yellowstone, that maybe we could forge a program that the West, that would be fair to the West and still fulfill this national goal of putting the wolves back into Yellowstone. And so we put together an advisory committee, wool growers, cattlemen, state agencies, sportsmen, environmental groups, and using what I think are some flexible tools in the Endangered Species Act, we put forth a plan to bring wolves back in. I wanted to hear a wolf in the region before my old bones went over the Great Divide.
Have you?
Yep. The rascals have been far more successful than the scientists said they would be. So it's worked. I regret that we haven't kept our promise that we made to the states, that they would be partners and managers due to liberal environmental activists in the courts, but it's been a successful program, always has been successful. The wolves have done far better than we ever predicted.
So it's something that you've hit on there that is always fascinating me, and more recently than ever, is that it seems like the conservatives nationwide have gotten a black eye on their environmental record, and the airspace is taken up from the progressive, call it left, that you can't be a conservative and a conservation at the same time. I feel like it's your record and a lot of the historical records prove differently, and I'd like to hear from you in person defending conservatives. Hunters and fishermen have a certain culture where there's no one that loves the outdoors more than hunter and fishermen, and they spend an incredible amount of resources and real money and respect for the landscape. It seems like the conservatives are getting a bad rap on this, and maybe they've lost their messaging, but boy, they seem to have a good record on the dollars and the interest and the heavy lifting. It's not about the talk or the Al Gore bandwidth of the media. It's more about just doing the work to get the conservation done.
Well, I think conservation really is a conservative value. It's budgeting your resources for the long term. It's being responsible to future generations. And, you know, it doesn't make my liberal activist friends very happy. But you look at the record in Wyoming, all the environmental safeguards and programs were put in place by Republicans. We certainly had Democratic help, but the real leadership, the forging of, then you look nationally, almost all our major laws, whether it's on wildlife or habitat or clean air, clean water, endangered species, NEPA, those were all done under Republican leadership. So I always felt my liberal friends talk a pretty good game. Maybe Democrats are a little better in the parts per million, getting another part per million out of a smokestack or something. But the programs that have really meant a lot to America. When I was at the Fish and Wildlife Service under President Bush, we created more national wildlife refuges than any president in America's history, more than Teddy Roosevelt. 54 new national wildlife refuges were created under President Bush. And his Clean Air Act, his taking on the oil companies on oil spills, offshore drilling, the record from Nixon, Reagan did some good things on our coast. Certainly George H.W. is going to be one of our great environmental presidents. So the record speaks pretty well, because conservatives, and as you mentioned, it's sportsmen who are certainly probably to the right of center politically. They're the ones that show up with the dollars and cents throughout America's history. They're the ones that finance research, finance management, and have put billions of dollars into habitat protection and restoration. It's the sportsmen, the hunting and fishing community who willingly tax themselves, buy the licenses. The non-game advocates are certainly important, but when it comes to who's put the resources, it's been the conservation community, the hunting and fishing community.
So, I think they both play a valuable role. I guess the thing that I consider and think about is that the science and a lot of the universities, liberal stuff is valid and necessary to move the ball forward. You need to have good research, good professors, and some of that stuff, you need to have liberal judges to keep the right in check. But the thing I struggle with is that the conservatives are all out to destroy the environment, when the record certainly doesn't reflect that. But I think this may be a good transition into your time in the Conservation Fund. You headed the Conservation Fund after the Fish and Wildlife Service. You really had to think creatively about how to solve problems. I mean, that's it, just solving problems, and that was with landowners, state agencies, federal agencies. A lot of conservation is about problem solving and getting people together in the same room to solve an issue. It's not the media or the short clip that gets the hard work done. So the Conservation Fund, in my humble opinion, is one of the best models in the country, because it's entrepreneurial, it's not avocation, it's solving problems. And speak a little bit to the work of the Conservation Fund, your work with Pat Noonan.
Well, I was really fortunate between the Fish and Wildlife Service and working for George W. Bush, State Department, to be at the Conservation Fund. I think it's probably the most effective conservation group in America today. It's really unique. It's a non-membership group. They're non-advocates. And they have the only charter that I'm aware of that's for conservation of land and water, but also it's for economic development and jobs. So it's a wonderful organization to put them on the interface. If we're going to make big gains going forward for wildlife, habitat, fisheries, watersheds, we just have to work positively with the nation's farmers, ranchers, developers, timber companies, and that's what the Conservation Fund does. They're very entrepreneurial, They're pro-business. I think we had 200 or 300 corporate partners. But together with the states, with land trusts and homeowners, right, probably protect as much, if not more, land than any group in the country. It's interesting that they spend less than 1% on fundraising and administration. They're the most efficient group in the country, but they're entrepreneurs, you said. They know how to do deals that work for all the players, for the communities involved, the landowners involved. They're very wise with their capital.
Speak to me about, because Pat Noonan founded the Conservation Fund, he's a big advocate of you and your good friends. Briefly about Pat Noonan's contribution.
Well, to be partners with Pat Noonan, he's really going to go down in history as one of the most visionary people in the whole arena. He was with the Nature Conservancy, felt the Conservancy, though they did good things, was getting too big, bureaucratic. He wanted a group that was more nimble, more pro-sector, founded the Conservation Fund. And Pat has just written a book on how to do partnerships, how to be collaborative, how to work for pro-economic development and jobs and looking after communities, same time protecting wildlife habitat, watersheds, open space, recreational opportunities. Pat has, there's acres all over America and watersheds and corridors that probably wouldn't have been protected for future generations without Pat putting his
Well, I think so.
imprint.
He did.
Wonderful guy.
So your time with the Conservation Fund, I know meant a lot to you, and your relationship with Pat Noonan today still is strong. After the Conservation Fund, you went to serve for George W. Bush, Assistant Secretary of Oceans, Environment, and Science. This took your skill set from a state to a national to now an international level. I've always been fascinated by, you had water quality and international interests, which are not necessarily in concert with good conservation. So you had to work with developing countries to develop programs that were forward-thinking and big. So talk to us about your Secretary of State experience with Colin Powell, and particularly your work in Africa. I think is of interest to me, at least.
Well, I just had some of the best opportunities in Washington. The best job was Fish and Wildlife Service. Second one might have been over at the State Department because I just had a great portfolio. I'd worked for Governor Bush when he was in Texas. We probably did, people don't realize that, saved 250,000 acres across Texas, state parks and endangered species and watersheds. So he asked me to help him in the re-election, and I presented a little bit of a problem for him in his White House, because when the word got out that Turner might join his administration, they got a jillion letters from some of the far right. The land use went after him, but my portfolio was wonderful. I had bioterrorism, I had infectious disease, all these science programs, timber programs, ocean programs, environmental programs. So it was a great portfolio, and it was great working with General Powell, Colin Powell. I met with him every morning, 8 o'clock, and he was a superb leader, knew how to run a train on time. Well, when I came in, the world was looking at sustainability, a summit on sustainability. So the White House tasked me, all right, Turner, you're going to put all the sustainability programs around the world for the United States. So I could work with the Department of Energy and Commerce and the Ag Department. I have every agency in town that I called together, and we started to look at it, access to fresh water, access to energy, and women's right and access, but also sustainable environmental projects. And we must have put 20 or 30 big projects around the world. Everything from climate change to oceans and protecting tropical forests. And one of the messages that I think we tried to project, if you're interested in environmental problems, you can't just think about saving a forest or a river or a critter, especially the developing world. You have to think about some other things. People want a job, so you have the economic sustainability. They need health care and education, whether it's HIV, AIDS, or malaria or whatever. You need to help with health care, and kids need to be educated. Third, then you can work on environmental sustainability. And the fourth thing you have to work about now, there's 4 legs to this stool, is security. They've got to be able to sleep at night without terrorists blowing up their villages. So every package we put together, we had to think jobs, we had to think healthcare, women's rights. Is there a free press? Is there an agency that has reliable laws and stable permit systems and stuff? So we did some wonderful programs that the United States headed up around the world. Good little fireplace.
Well, it took a while to get going, but it's going now.
Warms this place up good.
So in Africa, I know you did a lot of work with the national park system there, particularly the Congo Basin, which has got its own history, which is fascinating to me, but you spent a lot of time in Africa.
You know, I'd never been to Africa until joining the State Department. First year, I think I was there 5 different times. Africa just grabs your heart. In some ways, it's a basket case of disease, poverty, corruption. But once you've been, the people, the music, the landscape. We did a lot of programs on agriculture, access to just basic energy. So that, we lose about 600,000 or 700,000 women and kids a year just to respiratory diseases because they're cooking with dung and wood and poorly ventilated huts. So just to give them basic electricity or the loss in HIV, AIDS, and malaria. So working in Africa, trying to power women, so much of the developing world. If you want peace, you want sustainability, empower women.
So there's a story in Africa that I don't think people will believe is true, but I want you to tell it in your own words briefly about your time with the gorillas. It's the most amazing story.
Oh, yeah.
But tell that one briefly, because before you go to your resting place, I want to hear on the record that this actually happened.
Well, it doesn't sound believable, but the story with the gorilla absolutely did happen.
Well, you give us the cliff notes there, because it's worth the tale.
Well, we were out looking for gorillas, and we were in the middle of nowhere up this river. We were an hour and a half from the nearest village, power pole, road, anything, and we pulled in next to the bank, and the guy said, Mr. Turner, we probably won't see him. You've only got a few hours, and we should be here for days. And
you're in a dugout canoe, right? You're in a dugout canoe with a motor
yeah,
on the
in a
back.
dugout canoe, maybe 25 feet long, with 2 lawn chairs and an engine. We pulled over, we tied up, but this guy starts doing this Tarzan routine. Whoop, 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 whoop. And we're sitting there, and I'll be dang, Mark, about 350-pound silverback male gorilla comes right up to the bank, opens up the bushes. I mean, we're 15, 20 feet from this thing, and he's, oh my gosh. And of course, we're taking pictures, and he's looking at us and looking at us, and we're sitting there real quiet, and I went, just like that. He goes right up the trees, right over our canoe. Oh, wow, now we got a 350-pound silverback gorilla 6 feet above us in the trees. Well, these guys knew something about gorillas. They said, Turner, Mr. Turner, Secretary Turner, untie the boat. So I said, okay, untied the boat, and they fired up the engine, and we just started to pull out, and that
So wait a
gorilla.
minute, wait a minute. You're in the boat, to set the scene. You got a 300-pound silverback on a tree above you. You're in the bow of the boat.
I'm in the bow boat, my assistant, Claudia is second, and then a couple biologists, and then a guy running the boat.
Gotcha. And you're in the middle of nowhere, right? You're 20.
I'm up front, and then,
But you're how many miles away from civilization at this point?
well, we're in the middle of nowhere. The only thing we've seen coming up this river are crocodiles and hippos and swollen river with logs, and I mean, there's nothing.
See, you look up and this fucking gorilla's about to. He's on the branch looking down at you. And he
So
says,
this gorilla's up there, they said, they knew that was not a good system. This
One
gorilla's could tear you to pieces in a nanosecond. So they fired up the engine and I unhooked the boat. We just start to pull out, start to get a little momentum. It's strong current. This gorilla swings down out of the trees, lands in the middle of the canoe. Right in the middle, boom. And then, well, the guys that knew something about gorillas, the guy running the boat and the other two guys, they said, we're out of here. They dove in the river. So now, recap. The boat, the motor's running, we're pulling out in the river, John's in front, ladies in exit, gorilla's in the middle, and nobody's running the boat, and we're picking up speed out into the river. I mean, we're picking up speed, and we're gonna die. This is not going to end well. We made a big turn, we're moving. We're either gonna tip over, we're gonna break in two, the hippo will get us, the crocodiles will get us. At least I could grab them, we plowed into them, and I could hold the boat, and the dugout swung around. The gorilla says, I'm out of here. He swung up into the trees and grabbed an orange life preserver and back, landed and he bounced up. Now, okay, I played your game, now you come ashore. So it got all over Africa how this crazy American secretary went out in the dugout with a gorilla. Really happened. Called him Bongo.
That's fucking amazing. To have a gorilla jump in a dugout canoe.
But the reason we were there, we were doing what's called the Congo Basin Forest Partnership. And one of the most remarkable projects ever been blessed to be involved in. In 6 nations, we kind of patterned it after the National Geographic Megatrek that Dr. Michael Fay took almost 2,000 miles. But we found areas that the world really didn't know, with forest elephants and hippos and lowland gorilla populations and beautiful national parks, river systems.
You've been talking too much. You better have a little swing.
Oh, thank you. Anyway, we were able to create, I think, 23 new national parks, protected about 25 million acres of the most fabulous habitat. At the same time, you had to work on with villages, how are you going to get jobs there, better schools, better health care, better education. We had 17 countries involved, a lot of nonprofits, church groups. It's one of the poorest parts of Africa. But these national parks are just wonderful. The public, hopefully there's not much infrastructure, airports, hotels, but hopefully over time people are going to be headed to the Congo Basin.
Well, we had the treat of taking off to Africa last year, and I was, it's an experience that it definitely changes you. But you realize the country in Africa, the countries in Africa that have invested in conservation and wildlife habitat and are not corrupt are doing well now. It's the corrupt countries in Africa that don't have those natural resources that are really struggling.
Africans have a way of preying on Africans that just breaks your heart. But those that will establish the rule of law and involvement of their citizenry, a free press, adopt some good old rules of capitalism and entrepreneurship. Africa has such great potential. They got great resources, but real challenges. The natural resources of Africa are just amazing.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit here, but you've worked at the State Department, you've had a long career now, you've hung up your briefcase and have headed out to Jackson. You live there with mom and you're very active. I think now more than ever, now that I have 3 kids, about legacy and passing things down to different generations. One of the things that I talked to Sarah last night driving the basketball game, she wanted to ask is, it was a pretty profound question that she asked. I said, Sarah, what do you think about asking Papa tomorrow? We're going to sit down and talk. And one of her questions was, this is pretty profound and it's going to be tough to answer maybe, is ask Papa if we're going to be okay. And I don't know how to answer that, maybe you don't either, but
How what?
are we going to be okay? You look at all this shit that's going on right now with politically and the left and the right, and certainly the environment's part of that, but you know, as a young kid that's going to live another 60, 70 years, and she's going to have kids, it's a profound question.
Wow.
Given your experience, you know, how do you answer someone who says, are we going to be okay?
Boy, that is profound, but not surprisingly from Sarah. Well, I think so. I think we have to go back to some core values that are grounded in faith. And a loving God, but we have to look after one another. We have to think about our neighbor, think about the blessings that this country and people around the world have got. I think we have to care about one another. I think technology today has brought us some amazing things, in food production, and healthcare, and energy. So I think we go back to our roots where we work together in a democratic system. We reward people for hard work, good ideas that make our world better. So I think so, and I think because of people like Sarah, young people today that are volunteering to help others and worried about making the world a better place, I'm optimistic that the young people today, hopefully there's enough of them that care about that and care about the planet, care about one another. I think we're going to be all right.
Well, I don't know. I'd like to challenge you on that. As a parent now with the kids and the bandwidth of flat screens and how much it's changed information, the way it's presented, that's why I love this opportunity to sit in this cabin and talk to you about this in a long format where the whiskey's still in the bottle and the fire's in the fireplace. You have an opportunity to really talk about things. I worry as a parent now in what I'm seeing politically and from a media perspective that the bandwidth and the respect for our neighbors is fleeting to a point where I don't see how it comes back.
Well, certainly we're being challenged, being tolerant of one another, this identity politics, victimization, somebody's got to pay because I'm a victim, that is dangerous. That is dangerous. In some ways, technology, growing up, of course, I didn't even know what was happening down the road, much less around the world. We have an opportunity to become more aware of issues around the world, people in need, a way to respond. So that kind of technology is pretty good. We spend too much time addicted to trivia. In that world of information and transparency. I think if people harken back to their faiths, unfortunately, I think here in America and around the world, we've lost a little bit of our moral rudder. What's right, what's wrong seems too much relevance today. Sorting out right from wrong.
I mean, it seems to me that the right and wrong thing is taken on a level where it's more important to be right on a social media platform and say that you're right, and it's almost like a self-righteous, I make myself feel better because I'm doing the righteous thing, and it's less personal about doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. So in one way, the media and the way the social media works is revolutionary because you're able to get big ideas out to millions of people in a nanosecond. But it's also its worst enemy because you can be self-righteous in that same platform and not address the undercurrent of doing the right thing for right itself. So I've always been impressed, frankly, with your character. Maybe this leads back to the Wyoming roots and your upbringing, but doing right for the right sake, for not recognition, is a hard thing to do.
Well, I've always been motivated, just get excited about trying to make something better or fix something, and maybe that comes from the ranching days. I agree, there's too much I win, you lose, I up, you won, and whether it's on social media or whatever it is, it's not even right and wrong. I do you in by being sexier, smarter, a better quip, in your face. I win by doing you in, and that's not a way to move us forward, the world forward.
Well, I'd like to pick up, we're just about to the end of the bottle, which is almost the end of the conversation, so.
Boy, that is nice.
Wow.
That is smooth, that is.
Less about the bourbon, more about the experience. Well, picking up where we were left off before, I've always, I have faith in, my kids and the generation, because I do see a lot of good there, and it gives me a lot of hope. I just worry about the cycle of information, and I think that's one of the reasons why, I was intrigued by having this conversation with you, because it seems to me that people are really drawn towards, and maybe this is like counterpunch to what the short media cycle is, but people seem to be devouring longer format conversations, and the need for both sides to sit down and have a real conversation about where their differences are and where there's agreement. And you can't get that with a Facebook or Instagram or Fox News or CNN. It's too keeping score in short cycles. So the opportunity to sit down with your old man or your counterpart, you worked with some real heroes in political format, and one of my heroes is Al Simpson, who's a good friend of yours. They seem to strike a different chord back then, reaching across the aisle, statesmanship, of some true underlying respect of, yeah, I disagree with you, but God damn it, this is the country and we're going to get things done. I don't know.
Well, I agree with you. Too much time on devices, too much short, interactive stuff. As I look back, growing up on the ranch, working in the legislature, working in 2 administrations, working on the Hill with diverse groups, ranchers, farmers, lobbyists, you need to establish a relationship of trust and mutual respect, and that way you need to spend time together. You and I may not agree on issue A, but we'll find values that we share together, we'll find things that we do share together, we'll find goals that we both agree on. And so rather than getting a fist fight over issue A, which we know we didn't agree on, we start to build trust, we start to understand one another. We don't listen enough. So I said, now I get it. If I can help you with your problem, I think there's a way you can help me with mine, and that's how you get stuff done. It's It's compromise in a way, which some people think is a dirty word. It's helping people, different people all come out winners, not absolute winners, but ahead of where they were before. And that's how you get stuff done. And I hear what you're saying today. The short stuff, gotcha, blasting, immediate gratification. Building those values, those relationships. You got to do it here in Virginia, you got to do it Washington, D.C., you got to do it around the world with different countries.
Yeah, but I guess the thing I struggle with as a parent now and seeing how, I mean, shit, today, when I grew up on the ranch and similar to you, we'd go outside in the morning and we'd build forts and we'd fight with each other and we'd play games or football, but you had to solve each other's problems in real time. Where today you have video games or Fortnite or whatever, and people, it's a fixed set of solutions and you can conquer something. And so the ability to develop the skill set to have a fist fight in a playground and work things out, it seems like we're coddling people's emotions so they're protected, but that's the exact opposite thing you want to do, because if you really want to get tough and fair-minded people in dialogue, you should remove yourself from that and let them work it out. And I feel like this marshmallow attempt of protecting everything is really preventing the character you need and the skill set to have those deeper conversations across the aisle.
Yeah, we don't want people to hear stuff that might be offensive. I think growing up on the ranch was good for all of us. You had to see something through. You couldn't short circuit because somebody was dependent on you. In some cases, other people's lives depended on your seeing it through, doing it right. You couldn't just cop out because I'm tired, it hurts. You had to see it through. Building those communication links so we don't just talk over one another, so I win my point. More important, we gotta learn to listen and value the person that we disagree. Value what he's saying and listen. I develop a level of respect. I even, some of my biggest enemies, opponents, not enemies, were friends. You know, in the Wyoming legislature, you get up and you and I could duke it out on a bill. We just go at each other, see who could win the votes. And then after it was over, one of us would win, one of us would go to lunch together, because in the afternoon we got a bill coming up that we're both sponsors of. We got to stand back to back and defend it. So you stay friends, you fight for your positions, but you build friendships, trust. Want to take care of one another.
So you've told the story many times, but I'd like you to share it. When you were in a coffee shop, was it in Gillette? Someone came up to you and recognized, or was it in Laramie?
Laramie.
I think it's yeah. My point is, you've pissed off a bunch of people in your career. I think you've made more friends than enemies, but you certainly made some people that are upset with you if you take a stand. But it's a great story.
Well, parts of Wyoming are still hanging me in effigy. Oh, you're talking about when I've really gotten interested in helping build a school of natural resources at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. Working with kids, working with the programs, build on collaborative skill sets, multidisciplinary training, groups coming together, different viewpoints and so forth. Well, we had a meeting one morning. God, it was early. I can't remember whether Simpson was there. Bill Ruckelshaus, first administrator of EPA under Nixon, president of the university, whatever. I chaired the advisory committee, so we're meeting real early and going over the agenda and what we're going to do during the day. And so we're there early, and one table over there was a bunch of ranchers. You could tell they all had their hats on. you could tell they'd had that table
They're
since.
talking about the weather and how much the government's screwing it, right?
Yeah, those ranchers had that table every morning. They've been gathering there every morning since statehood to solve all the world's problems so forth. So we're meeting. I can see them pointing, talking about me. I got a little puffed up, thought, well, that must be pretty hot stuff. I said, you know, yeah, I reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone. And yeah, I listed the spotted owl. But also I'd been considered a candidate for governor and had served two administrations. And it's nice to be home to be remembered after all these years. So I go up to pay the bill, and this one old rancher follows me up, and I looked around. He didn't look very happy. His hat pulled down, sweatband around. He's chewing on a match. He didn't look very good. I turn around and he says, hey, mister. Yes, sir. He's punching me right here. He says, anybody ever tell you look a lot like John Turner? I said, whoa. He said, I bet it makes you madder than hell, doesn't it? So
what'd you say to that? You just walk on your way?
yeah, I forget what I said. Everybody tell you look a lot like John Turner. Makes you madder than hell, doesn't it?
Well, Dad, this was a dream of mine. I've been thinking about, the brand we're trying to create here with Lost Whiskey and in general, of creating intimate spaces in nature that allow you the opportunity to converse with close family and friends in a very simple, almost Scandinavian format, but minimalist to the core and just simple whiskey, fire, and people you really love and trust it's been something I've been thinking about for a while. So to have you here back in Virginia to allow me to do this is just a real treat for me and what we're trying to do in this brand. So thank you for one.
Well, it's just, I mean, how long since I or any of us have sat by a fire with a good glass of bourbon and just relax, related.
We're almost done, yep.
Oh boy, listen to one another. I'm really proud of what I see going on at Lost Whiskey. It's not only flat out gorgeous, the views of horse country and
We're done. We're done with the bottle.
vineyards and open space, the Appalachia Trail just up the ridge here. But take this piece of property that undoubtedly somebody worked back in the 1800s with teams of horses and axes and shovels, no tractors, cleared this land. Probably some poor slaves were hauled up here to build rock walls and labored. This land's got a lot of history, but you've kept its openness. You're instilling the values of quietness, of solitude, reflection, a little bit of ruggedness up here at Lost Whiskey with some pretty good bourbon. Thank you.
Well, I've been in our team at Greenspur, who's talented beyond belief. There's a nerve ending with people, and it ties into this conversation where I think people are really cooked right now with the amount of information they're importing, flat screens and media. They're freaking craving a glass of whiskey in front of a fire with good people. So the value of experiences is starting to go through the roof. People are really starting to draw back from this keeping up with the Joneses. It's so much information, and to keep up with it, people are either subconsciously or consciously craving real conversations with people, and I think that's why the bourbon movement and the craft movement and the foodie movement is such a popular thing right now. But this is a small cabin we built. It's 200 square feet. We've put it on the internet. It's the amount of national attention that people are feeling, and it's not just that it's a very simple design, but it's hitting a nerve ending with people that, and this is what I guess gives me hope, is that people want experience right now, and they want conversations with their old man, or
Be off the grid.
yeah, but it's just not just being off the grid. It's about connecting with people they really love, and so much of the modern day stuff doesn't give you that gratification. So whether it be having a cold beer with your buddy, after fishing, or having a whiskey with your dad on the mountain, it's just the value of that experience to me is so rich. And it's not just us, but people are really swinging back this way, which gives me, and they love the long conversation and the thoughtfulness. That's what gives me hope. It's so this is.
I'm proud of you. You know where I think it all started was back at the Triangle X when we got our first TV, and it wasn't very good, but you kids, of course, pretty excited about TV, and then I shot it with a 45 Colt Peacemaker, shot the TV, so that was the end of TV for about 7 or 8 years. You kids grew up without it.
No bullshit. I don't think I was even born then.
You grew up
The old
without
man, for the record, shot the TV when he was listening to the news with a 45 caliber, and he caught half the house on fire. There's still, and it's public knowledge now, but he definitely did shot the TV. So we grew up with no TV, so we're the anti-culture.
But you valued the time you were able to spend. We sat at the dinner.
We have 5 minutes left, so.
All visited. But I think not having a TV was, you're harking back to those days.
Well,
But I've enjoyed it. Let me ask you a question, Mark. Too much about me. As you look back at your growing up at the Triangle X, and I look at the amazing things you're doing now, creative, sustainable, innovative, out of the box. You grew up in the Triangle X where you had to start work early, given tremendous responsibilities, you and your siblings. And then had to take people down dangerous rivers where their lives were in your hands. You took people into the wilderness, their health and safety. You had to work hard, learn skill sets at a pretty young age. What kind of values did you get growing up at the ranch that are enabling you pretty well today?
well, I would say that my life growing up on the ranch was nothing but grateful. Man, maybe I hit the lottery on growing up in the Triangle X. I think most of my cousins would agree. We hit the lottery. Through good luck and fortune, we were born into a situation that was magical. I look back on the lessons you gave us were, it doesn't matter how hard you party the night before, but you goddamn better be at breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning. You instilled that. Harold and Donald instilled that. It's play hard, but better show up at 7 o'clock to work hard the next day. And if you miss breakfast at 7 o'clock, you might as well pack your bags and head down the road. That lesson to me, I can't give enough appreciation for. It was respect for your fellow mates to not let them down, but to be at breakfast to talk about the day's activities and stuff like that. What a rich upbringing. I'm fortunate beyond belief. As a father now, looking back on that, I bring my kids to the ranch. I see the change in them when they unplug from the East Coast lifestyle and have the opportunity to ride horses and make campfires and make forts and make friends. I see the change in them, and it's remarkable in a matter of days where they translate from a kid that's pretty high-stressed to, they love life and they love the sharing with people, and they talk about it all the time about how can I get back out of the Triangle X, and they just love it. So a real gift of fortune, and it's fate to some degree, but the West has treated us principles, and as a father, grateful.
Well, how blessed we are that the Triangle X, those old funky log cabins, it's been a life stream of instruction, core values, teaching, and instilling certain ways to live that we've all been able to experience and hopefully absorb good stuff from.
Cheers.
Proud of you.
Well, I'm proud of the lessons you've been. I'll tell one final story. This will be a cut. 1 minute. You don't remember this story? We were in high school and you bought a goddamn light fixture for the house. It didn't work at the light fixture, so you had to return it. To return it to the light fixture, you brought the other thing back and I was helping with it. And the green ground screw was missing on the light. And so you left it on the first box. And so she said, Mark, we gotta take this green ground screw back to Home Depot because someone else is gonna be left without the green ground screw. We drove all the way fucking back to Home Depot to return this one green ground because you knew that someone else was gonna miss that screw. That lesson I'll never forget because you knew someone else was gonna be hurt by this. No one else would have taken that green ground screw back to Home Depot. But God damn it, John Turner did because he knew it was gonna hurt someone else. And I guess that's the final, you do things because you know they're right and you're not gonna get credit for it. So, thank you, Dad. Cheers.